Welcome to the Maternal Wealth Podcast, a space for all things related to maternal health, pregnancy, and beyond. I'm your host, Stephanie Terrio. I am a labor and delivery nurse and a mother to 3 beautiful boys. Each week, we dive into inspiring stories and expert insights to remind us of the power that you hold in childbirth and motherhood. We're here to explore the joys, the challenges, and the complexities of maternal health. Every mother's journey is unique, and every story deserves to be told. Please note that this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider for medical guidance that is tailored to your specific needs. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Welcome to Maternal Wealth Podcast. Today, we have Carla. She reached out to me a couple weeks ago. She sent me a message on Instagram and she said to me, quote, "I am an artist and a mom who uses creativity to help moms connect to their superpowers." After I read that, I was like, yes, we need to connect. Carla, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
I'd like for you to start off by sharing with us a little bit about yourself before you became a mom.
Ooh, before I became a mom. Okay. That takes me back to being super little. I always knew I wanted to be an artist. So I did end up going to art school, and I've always taught as well. Always done some kind of teaching with kids, always loving art, and did a lot of work in the community. Before I became a mom, working for the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program. Philly was the city where I was, in my college years. I'm from the Boston area. And then I got married, moved out to Portland, Oregon, and now I have 2 kids. And I came back to Massachusetts.
Tell us about when you first found out you were pregnant with your first child.
I remember. Oh my goodness. I was living in Portland, Oregon. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I remember taking the test for sure, seeing the line on the pregnancy test. I do remember telling my husband. I remember that moment. We were in the kitchen. So yeah, it was just a super, super exciting moment. I always knew that I wanted children. That was always something for sure that I wanted.
How was that first pregnancy for you?
I was blessed to be in a community of so I'm from, Massachusetts. We went out to Portland, Oregon. We had no family around, but my block was like everybody, it was like magic. Everybody on the block, we were friends with all the neighbors. There were young children. There were people, just starting families. So I was so lucky to be my whole community was on my block. So I definitely had, there was a doula on my block. There was a woman who worked at Planned Parenthood on my block. I was also the kind of person that I sought out information. I knew okay, this is what's on my mind. This is, how I want to go about things. I've always been that, just curious and gathering information. And it's different in Portland, Oregon too. I think there's so many more alternatives out there that I was not exposed to when I was living on the East Coast. They're there on the East Coast, but out in Portland, there was just a lot of just alternatives and alternative approaches. And it was everywhere. So it was easy for me to access what I was looking for while I was pregnant with my first child.
When you say alternatives, what do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of people that do home births out there. I think Portland, Oregon has the highest percentage of home births.
Okay.
Prenatal yoga, just a lot of naturopathic doctors, holistic approaches, a lot of, it's so funny. I'm thinking about there's this episode from The Simpsons with the, breastfeeding, and Marge is, with a group of people, and she's like, oh my goodness. I forget if the group was Portland moms, but they're showing them, all the alternatives kind of, I don't know, just more a natural sort of being okay with just breastfeeding in public and things like that. And it's so funny because when I did come back to Boston, I hadn't been back in so long. And I was like, oh, it feels very different here too. It was just, I called Portland, Oregon. My former husband and I were just always like, yeah, it's a bubble out there. So yeah. And I was exposed to, and that's where I was first introduced to Tammy Lynn Kent and Wild Feminine. And that was a book that I read that was, about more just discussing the wisdom of women's bodies and ability to birth. I was reading Ina May Gaskin too, who was a person that was a leader in midwifery and home birthing.
Speaking of all the alternative aspects of maternal care, prenatal care, I'm curious to hear about what you decided to do for the labor and birth of your first child.
Yeah. So for my first child, I had a hospital birth through nurse midwives. So the program I went to was all nurse midwives. So for me, it was at the beginning anyway, I felt like, oh, this made the most sense to me, even though I was definitely interested in home birthing. I had, like I said, I have a doula on my block, a woman who had 2 home births. And I also had a woman on my block who had a regular hospital birth. So I knew what all the options were. And for me, having a nurse midwife care in a hospital, that's where I started. And then interestingly, like I said, I was reading Ina May Gaskin, I was reading Wild Feminine, or, I was interested in natural birth. I took a birthing from within class, and I remember, and I catered my appointments to have the same nurse midwife at every single appointment. And this nurse midwife, a friend of mine, had her for her birth. And she's like, oh, Betsy, she's amazing. I'm like, great. I met with her the first time. And then I decided I wasn't going to follow the hospital rules, which were every time you go for a prenatal visit, they say they want you to see all the midwives because you never know who's going to be there when you give birth. And I was like, no, I'm keeping the same ones. So I got to know her, she got to know me, and it just felt better. And that's what I wanted. And I remember I was getting close. I think I was in 30 weeks. I think it was 32 weeks. And I said, I'm reading Ina May Gaskin. And I'm like, what's the difference between what I'm reading in that book versus what it's like in the hospital? And Betsy was like, it is nothing like that. And I'm like, so she worked with me, and she, then you take the hospital tour. And I remember taking the hospital tour, and I was like, oh boy, I'm like, there's just something about it that I was just like, I'm not sure I want to give birth in the hospital anymore. So at like 30 weeks, I was looking at birth centers and like a different thing. I was like, I think I want to birth at home. In the end, I stayed having the hospital birth with the midwives. And, at the time, like everybody says, like you can have a birth plan, but you never know how it's going to go. Right. Yeah. And I think as first-time moms, we always try to, or I'll just speak for myself. It's like, okay, this is my idea of what I want, and I have no idea what I'm getting into, but I'm doing all this preparation for it. And I decided, and I talked to some close people. I'm like, what do I do? And the advice I got that really stuck with me was like, you're having a baby, and you at the end, you will have your baby, right? And think about, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with the hospital birth because it was a little bit, there were just a bunch of different reasons that at that time, I made that decision. And as they say, your birth goes how it goes. And, and then afterwards, I mean, there isn't just, I think one thing as a pregnant mom, I remember like from my personal experience was you do so much preparing, but there's no real what happens afterwards while you're pregnant and preparing. Like you don't get that information. You're doing all this front loading of the pregnancy and the birth. But what I feel like is missing in a lot of that information, maybe it's because, you're excited and all that. But I think what a lot of what's missing is like, no, you know what? Breastfeeding is, it's not just easy peasy. Like there can be challenges there, or, your postpartum time. Like I remember like you hear like, oh, postpartum depression, but at the time when you're just giving birth, you're like, it doesn't really sink in I think, about what life is like after the baby's here. And I remember, just with my birth, which was challenging. I don't want this to sound wrong in any way, but I remember telling someone like, it was easier to love my baby and be attached to my baby and do everything with my baby while my baby was still inside of me. And then when my baby was out in the world and, crying and I'm trying to figure out what to do, I'm like, I know I signed up for this and it's so hard.
Yeah.
Afterwards. And so again, I was super lucky. I had a community to help me afterwards and just sort of help me sort out all those feelings that can come up. And I had a neighbor who had postpartum depression. And so I understood better from her experience. Like we shared, like women share, like we talked about all of it on my block. So I never felt alone. I did feel supported for sure.
I'm glad you had that community on your block to support you in the postpartum time. It can be difficult, and it's a recurring theme that I hear, I've experienced myself. So thank you for sharing that, because one of the points of the podcast is for us to share the realities of what we're feeling postpartum. Bring awareness to those who are pregnant or trying to get pregnant of the realities that can present postpartum. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, it's real. It's really real. And I'll never, ever forget, like, remember, I was telling you about, like, I remember getting seeing the pregnancy test in that moment. And I also will never forget the moment I was with my firstborn, who was probably like 3 or 4 months old, maybe 5. I don't know, not like baby, like still like a baby. And I went out my front door and then I like saw this little note that was stuck in my front door. And I was like, what is this? Like someone left me a note. I opened up the note and it was from my neighbor saying, moms are getting together at my house. Come join us. And I didn't know, like I said, we were like a young block. And I went, to her house and there were other moms there. I swear, I call them my Kellogg's angels. I lived on Kellogg Street. And so we went to this mom's house and she was like the mom on the block who at the time, had there was just, the ability to record shows and watch them. It wasn't like full time like streaming like we have now or whatever. And we record. And so we had a mom's gathering where we watched each other's babies. We brought food. It was like a potluck. And we watched Project Runway together. And that was like our, that there's like a meme that's like, what really turns on a mom or something is like when their partner is like vacuuming for them or whatever and cleaning up the house. Like that was our like, oh my God, like super indulgence time. We got together. Somebody else had their eyes on my child. I got to watch like Christian Siriano, like make these beautiful dresses out of trash. That was the Project Runway time, like the very beginning of Project Runway. And for us, like that was our creative space, like our creative gathering, like way back when it was like moms sitting around the fire or whatever, right? Yeah. This was our moms sitting around Project Runway. Our babies were our babies. And we could go to that and just be like, man, I did not sleep all night long. And we're like, we got you. I got my eyes on your kid for you, Mm-hmm. And so there was a group of us, a group of these little kids. And that was my saving grace. And that's what like really helped me too, to make the changes that I knew I needed to make once I became a mom.
I want to hear your birth story for your first child. I'm curious. I know you had a nurse midwife. Did you go in for an induction? Did you go into labor? Talk us through your birth story.
Sure. No, I went in naturally. And the thing was the first thing that surprised me when I went in was that the person that was on duty then, person I'd never met before, wasn't even part of the nurse midwife practice that I was going through the hospital, right? So immediately I'm like, I don't know you. But I was like, okay, we do it. And then changed shifts and everybody keeps asking you the exact same question, even though you've said it 10 million times, like, what's your name? And da 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 da. I had one thing that was big at the time too was, a water birth. And I liked this hospital because they had tubs. They would let you labor in the tub, but you couldn't give birth in the tub. So I did that. I got to go in the tub, but then, and I was like, progressing, whatever. But then, they also come in and check you. And then I got startled because, like, again, you're in your mom world, right? And the birthing experience. And then somebody came in, I heard the voice, I said, okay, I'm going to check you. But then when this person checked me to see, how much I had dilated, before the last time they checked me, I was at 6 centimeters, 6.5. This woman came, checked me. She's like, you're 2.5. And I was like, what? And like, I immediately came out of my like birthing, field, my birth field. I was like, what? I was 6.5. Like, and here I was thinking I was like I was getting further along. Right. She said, nope, you're 2.5. You've been laboring for a really long time. You need to get an epidural. This is, and I was just like I was just jarred. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, get this person out of the room.
Yeah.
I remember saying that. And so that was like my sort of a big pivotal moment. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping to have a natural birth and I didn't want to have an epidural. But it was that time, like the sort of crisis moment where I'm like, okay, what do I do? That's when I wish I had a doula in the room. I figured I didn't need a doula because I had nurse midwives attending me. I was like, oh, well, I'm having nurse midwives, so I don't feel like I need a doula. And at the time, I had my then husband and my mom there as well. So I thought they were enough of like my support team, like that's how I went into it. So I went into this real internal crisis of what do I do? I want to turn this around. But I also said, like, I said, okay, you can go get the anesthesiologist, right? However, internally, I was like, I want to turn this around for myself. Like, I don't want that. And so in some ways, it's kind of good, right? So it takes a very long time for them to get the anesthesiologist to show up, or maybe my time warp was all weird because your time is all weird. But I went to like all my resources and all my things that I remembered. And I did this, visualization of my baby opening, and I was saying the word like open and visualizing and all of that. And so by the time the anesthesiologist came, I had come back to like not needing it anymore. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, I think maybe that's when I said, get the person out of the room. Yeah. Great. I think because at that time there was, I was like in a better spot. I had regained, I guess, the, you know what I mean? Like where I was before. And of course, post birth, I realized what had happened, like as I understood my birth story more. So yeah, so then things progressed more. But then to the very close to the end, there was a moment where all of a sudden they're like, the cords wrapped around the child's neck. And so I did have a moment where all the doctors came in, everybody came around, they put the oxygen on me and all that. And so the very end of the birth, it was challenging and scary.
When you say the end of the birth and then they put the oxygen on you, is this when your child was still inside, or is this like immediate birth?
It was I guess because the cord was, this is my understanding, right? I can't tell you, I actually do have the records. I didn't look, but this was my understanding. Like when I was as the birthing person in the room, the cord was wrapped around the baby's neck. So they needed to quickly get the baby out, and they put oxygen on me and did whatever they do. Like it turned into, like everybody was around and I just heard beeping and I saw all these faces and masks and I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And they were like, and then they were telling me not to push because I was going to hurt the baby if I pushed, but my body naturally was doing what it was doing. Right. And so I got super scared because they said, I'm like, I don't want to hurt my baby, and my baby was born. They were counting me through whatever, like pushing and all that stuff. I don't remember exactly because, your body's doing what your body's doing. And as soon as he was born, I didn't see him at all. I barely saw him. And somebody said, take him away.
Mm.
And then my husband went out with the baby, like out of the room. So I guess, they do all the tests and stuff to make sure the baby's breathing and all that. So I never got the put the baby on the mom's chest thing. I just got take him away. I was like, where's my baby? So yeah.
We paused this episode for a quick message from our sponsor. At Maternal Wealth, we aim to ensure that you have access to the best and the most appropriate care. That's why we created a maternal healthcare provider database. Maternal health providers can easily create profiles to promote their services and business, helping to increase access for those seeking their care. This is a one-of-a-kind database that offers a new and exciting way for women to search for and find maternal health providers near them and tailored to their specific needs. Profiles feature badges that highlight various services such as TOLAC-friendly practices, all-female practices, LGBTQAI+ inclusivity, language options, access to vaginal breech services, and more.
And then I also had to get stitches afterwards because I had some tearing. And so it was quite some time. It was like maybe like in my mind, again, timing is all weird, but I had to wait. I had to have stitches and I had to wait until after they stitched and I could feel the stitches a lot because whatever they gave me didn't work. And then my baby came in, but it wasn't until like, I feel like 20 minutes later or half an hour, you know what I mean? But yeah, that was my birth story. I did get my baby at the end.
Even though it was 20 minutes, it stays with you, right?
Yeah.
Right? Even though you get your baby back, those 20 minutes that you're separated kind of always stays with you.
Oh yeah. It was definitely like, I didn't realize it at the time, so this was 17 years ago, but that was, for me, it was a birth trauma. It was a traumatic experience. The birth was a birth trauma. And I had previous trauma before giving birth. And a lot of times, and this is what I've learned through my work, things can get triggered with your body when you're in a situation like the birth field is just such a vulnerable time of opening. And that is why like my body closed up when the nurse came in to check me because I didn't feel safe, and so, and again, like these things I didn't understand these things until afterwards. But once again, I had, support around that. But what I feel like is that so many moms go into this birth experience, but we need to love and support the moms afterwards to help them heal and understand, like this wasn't their fault or their body, this or that, you know what I mean? Like I, for one, felt a lot of shame I remember this too. It was like one of those moments. At one time, I was very vocal. I was loud in the birth. And I was very aware that there was 3 other rooms and other birthing mothers around me. And I remember when I finally got my baby and they put me in the wheelchair and they were wheeling me out, right, to my room. I was like, I'm so sorry. I was so loud. I'm so sorry. I was apologizing. And, I felt bad in that moment, I felt bad for screaming and being loud and be like, oh, whatever it was that I needed to do, to get me through that experience. So then by the time I was in my room, the nurse midwife, he was the first one on duty that I went into. And I'm like, I don't know you at all, because he wasn't part of the nurse midwife program. He was back on shift or whatever. He's like, oh, so how'd it go? And you took longer than we thought, because that nurse midwife said to me, you're progressing. We're going to have this baby born before the next day. That did not happen. Right. So that was like the positive encouragement. That guy I liked. He was being a midwife, and then he heard what happened, whatever. And then he comes back and he's like, so I understand. And I was like, I just felt so bad because I was so loud. And he said to me, what, you think you're the only birthing person who's ever made sound, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, absolutely. Like he was helped me. Like he wasn't there. And that's the thing, like in the hospital, they keep changing shifts and there's different people coming in and out. Like my first intention was, or wish was like, I want the person who I'm connecting to all throughout my prenatal to be the one that's there when I'm giving birth. I would have felt, I know, hindsight's 2020, but I know things would have been different if I had called my midwife and if she had been there, the one that I had known the whole time, who was definitely comforting me and helping me. And the thing was, she actually like broke the rules and she gave me her phone number. And she said to me, Carla, if at any time when you're in the hospital giving birth, you call me, and because she told me about the birth world, and she was actually exiting it because she had a lot of challenges with, she wanted to be able to be more like a home birth midwife, Mm-hmm. And she was like a veteran. She'd been in the field for so long. So, had I called her, I know my birth would have been different if she was the one there with me the whole entire time. Hands down, I know that, but that was the birth I definitely had. And I grew so much from that experience. And it led me to absolutely positively, I'm like, next baby I am having a home birth. And I did.
I appreciate that you're recognizing the fact that the connection that a woman makes with their midwife or their birth provider throughout the prenatal period is so essential in having a positive, empowering birth. That connection, you're creating a sense of safety, a sense of sisterhood, of love, nurturing, and it's so vital in the current system that exists in the hospital and rotating all the providers. Mm-hmm. That's missing. And I appreciate that you're bringing that up, because even in your story, you're acknowledging the fact, you're saying out loud with your voice, if I had that midwife who wanted to be there for me, mm-hmm. my experience would have been different. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that, because it is so vital. And I want women to hear that message.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you learn, it's like, there's so, like, especially for first time moms, like, there's only, you can learn but you also learn through your experience of birth, right? Like we do all these things to prepare because we don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And then like you can learn just as much or grow or, heal.
Yeah.
After the birth too. Like I learned so much more about myself. And then I applied that to my next birth. And I think I hear this often, like, if a woman has a traumatic first birth, it can often be healing to have a second birth. Like the healing can happen, like like if you think of like the circle, of the birth and the cycle of birth, one birth can also help heal another birth. And I hear stories about that like all the time. And I was able to do healing with my firstborn from that traumatic birth after the birth. And I think women need to know that for sure, that you can re-enter that birth field, re-enter the birth energy. You don't have to go through the trauma again. You can work and heal it.
Yeah.
And you can heal. Like what happened to me was, since my baby wasn't placed on my chest right away, I felt there was a disconnection. There was a fracture in the birth energy because it's a loop, and the loop wasn't able to go all the way through, right? When my baby was first born, and like I said, I was having challenges with nursing and breastfeeding. Part of that was because there was a fracture. I didn't feel the connection to my baby. And I was like, what's going on here? I'm supposed to love my child at first sight. Like my ex-husband who's like, oh my God, I've never been so in love at the first sight. Like this is like kind of what we hear, right? And I'm like, what's wrong with me? I don't feel that. Of course it's my child. I love my child. Absolutely. But there was a connection piece that was missing because I wasn't with my baby the first however long. And this is part of my story too, but the first words I heard was, it's a boy. And so I was like, my body was like, oh, I had a boy. And I thought I had a girl. Like we chose not to have the sex revealed to us, but I just had a feeling I had a girl. And so I think that was part of, my, like, there was like this, like now, like, again, I can say like later on, so my body was confused because then before I got my baby back, the pediatrician on call came in and is like, oh, congratulations on your baby girl. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I told her, I'm like, no, I had a boy. So for the first 20 or whatever, how long, while I was going through the stitches, like all that, I thought I had a boy. And she's like, no. And I'm like, and of course she leaves because she's all like, they're so in the hospital, what's your name? And they put your thing on there like that. They were like, what? To make sure there was no like baby switching or whatever going on. And she went out and checked and she came back and she's like, no, I just checked. You have a girl. And I'm like, okay. So going through that as a mom, that postpartum like stage of like bonding with your baby, and there's so much that is going on. Like moms need so much nurturing. It takes a village. Like moms need other moms, like I said, I felt shame for being loud. I didn't understand, like, we all had our birth stories, but I had my group of moms. I had my Project Runway peeps where I know it was a safe place. We told our stories. That was where the healing happens. Healing happens when you're feeling safe. Because we walk into a birthing situation, we're bringing into that birth situation all of us. And giving birth is the most vulnerable thing that a woman, it's that you need safety around you. You need the people that are going to hold you, and not disrupt the birth energy in the birth field. Like I know I'm using terms like birth energy, birth field, like this goes with my sort of training in the holistic pelvic care and all that. And this was all stuff that was part of my understanding and my desire of wanting to give birth naturally.
All right. So you had your birth at the hospital, and previously you mentioned the next time I'm going to have a home birth. Mm-hmm. Did that happen for you?
Yes. Yes, it did.
I know you have a little bit of a cool story to share with us. I'm excited for our listeners to hear your home birth story for your second child.
Now you got my interest piqued because I'm like, oh, what's the exciting part? Let's see. Life happens, right? And my family left Portland, Oregon. We moved back to Massachusetts. I was 8 months pregnant. I knew I wanted a home birth. Had to find a home birth midwife pretty quickly. It's interesting. So this time I had like 3 prenatal, 3 appointments before my home birth, but I call it my homeless home birth because I still hadn't found a place for us to live. I was living with my mom while we were going through the move. My husband was still needing to finish up work. I moved here with my kid. I did that, but I did the things that moms do, right? The nesting. It was like, okay, get to it. Find your home birth midwife. And I did. And immediately I interviewed like 3 people. Mm-hmm. One day when my husband had his job interview here, like he was, and I knew right away. I'd sit down, I talked with each one of them. They were all wonderful, amazing people, but I knew right away which was the one that I felt the most comfortable with and connected to. And she was amazing. And we talked about my previous birth and we just went through it all. We went through what I wanted, how I was feeling. And I told her about my history of trauma. I don't even think I've even said it like yet in this interview. I have a history of incest and childhood sexual abuse. So she knew all of that. And the birth was so different. And I think part of it too was because when my first birth, I was more, in general, going into the birth, more detached from my body, from my trauma. And then the experience of having my first child opened up that trauma and exposed it. And I worked with it. So in my second birth experience, I was already more attached to my child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the pregnancy. Like, of course, I was attached to my first one, but the second one was different because I had a different relationship with my body at that time from having gone through the first birth. So I was more able to attune to not only sort of like say the words like open or, imagine it, like I was able to actually feel it more, if that makes any sense. Like I felt that connection of like, I was not like the idea is you're birthing with your child when you're giving birth. Like there was a relationship between me and my baby while we were birthing. Right. And I didn't have that understanding the first time. It wasn't so much there. It was there on the intellectual level, but not as much on that body level, if that makes sense. And so just having had the first birth experience, having done more work with my trauma, my sexual trauma and understanding healing it really did feel like it was a co-birthing experience with my second son. And it was completely different. And I understood too, there was less fear and there was a lot more safety. It was a fast birth. It was not a, scary birth. Like my body knew what to do. I was more in touch with my body and I knew my body knew what to do. I had more confidence in myself. It was amazing. Like it was, and he was born in somebody else's house. Because I didn't have a place to live. And my mom was like, there is no way you're doing home birth in my house, which, I had respected my mom and my mom took care of, my son, while I was in somebody else's house giving birth. And this time it was only my husband that was there. And yeah. And I had my baby right there, right away. He was put on my chest, and there was actually a hurricane happening outside.
Did your midwife make it with the hurricane?
Well, the funny thing is, she made it. She wasn't far away, but because I was birthing so quickly, her backup midwife came after the birth. She didn't make it. Or she came like right at the very end. That's what it was. So because and here's another thing I'll never forget. It was only like the next town over, but because there was like a hurricane, we wanted to get back to my mom's house, right? So we slept over, my son was born in the middle of the night, like at 2:30 in the morning. I slept in the next morning. And then of course, I'm from, the Boston area, right? So my mom and my son come to, meet the new baby with Dunkin' Donuts, with the munchkins. And I'm like, oh yeah. Like, it was so cute. But we were there just for a short time and then we hurried up and got back to my mom's house. And so then the owner of the house was like, I didn't even get to see you. Like, she was on vacation. She came back the next day and she was hoping, she'd kind of get to be there. And I'm like, sorry. So we rushed back home and yeah. And I really took to the advice I got from my midwife in the second birth of, stay home with your baby as much as you can. Spend that as much as you can. And thankfully I was at my mom's house, so my mom could be with with my son and stuff while I was spending time with my second. So it was interesting. Yeah. And then we finally moved in. So he was born August 27th and I think we moved October 1st to our apartment. Yeah.
After sharing your two birth stories, one in the hospital, one at home, thinking about your work as an artist, how did your experiences transform your expression in art and your gift with art to help heal other women and mothers?
I was always on my personal journey of healing from my sexual abuse and incest trauma. And I just knew going into pregnancy that I was going to need, some extra support and guidance. And I had been teaching children art. I had lots of community art, like I said, doing community murals and teaching kids. By the time I had my first child and what I was going through, and with the support of the other moms on my block, and I went through what I called my mom's identity crisis with my first child, because I was like, who am I? What am I doing? Because my husband was also an artist and we had business together. And I realized I'm like, my child is not going to know that I'm an artist because I'm not doing my art right now. And so I was like, so it's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. So the flip was I'm no longer wanting to teach kids because I've got kids. I want to work with the moms. Mm-hmm. And because moms need to be supported. We're fucking, excuse me, I don't know if I should swear on this. We're amazing, creative human beings. Okay. We are creative human beings by like our bodies, our creation. We make the babies, right? And we need support. And through the arts, Project Runway, that was a form of using the arts to heal. We gather around and we're commenting on, I wonder what material they're going to use this week. And we're talking about the fashion and we're talking about the colors we like. We're like little not mini fashion designers, but we're gathering in a creative way and we're supporting each other. And so that's where the Ladies Entrance, where my, current business, that was the genesis of it, was right there, where I started having moms coming over to my studio in Portland, Oregon, and coming together and doing art together. Like, come on, moms, like let's do this kind of thing. I knew I needed to get back to doing my art for myself as my own part of identity. And I also knew, as far as the work I wanted to do, it was with moms and women and pregnant women. So the start of Ladies Entrance happened in Portland. Then I moved to Massachusetts, right? I should say too, the Belly Bowls started in Portland, Oregon. But anyway, when I was pregnant with my second, I was still within the young mothers community. So I had friends that I knew around me. And to help with that sort of connection, I got this idea from taking that class of Birthing from Within. They incorporate arts into that class. And it's really about honoring and mothering the mother. Like that part of that birthing course really stood out to me. And the ideas also of having a mother ceremony, like a mother way or a blessing way, or, a celebration for the mom, right? Because it's such a transformational time and you're going from maidenhood to motherhood, right?
Right.
But honoring this, asked a friend of mine if I could make a belly bowl, which was, so I have experience in clay. So we got together and I created a bowl on, like, when you think of, when you like are in school and you learn how to do like a coil pot.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's just so much more symbolism too with that. So I made a coil pot on her pregnant belly as a way to honor her, because, at the time there's different ways that different people do. Like, I know sometimes people do casts, like plaster casts of their bellies. Right. Or, something like that. But because I'm more like earthy, natural, like I'm like, I would prefer something of the earth to be, and I'm like, clay is of the earth and plaster, is just a whole different, aesthetically, I was like, I wonder what it'd be like to actually create a bowl, from the earth. And so that's what I did. I did a couple belly bowls and created these bowls, and then I glazed them. And then the moms had these precious keepsake of that time of, being connected with their child while their child was in utero. And that idea just sort of, I remember too, I did a few belly bowls in Portland. And then when I came here to Massachusetts, I was like 8 months pregnant or whatever. And we needed to make my own belly bowl, right? And so, and I also do belly bowls like with families, like I've done it with people like as a group too. So I remember we did my belly bowl in my mom's house. It was the day before I went into labor because my son came a little early, right? I'm like, thank God. But it was this beautiful thing of my mom, my husband at the time, my son, three of us, rolling out the snakes and creating this bowl. And then I asked my son, how he wanted to like label it. And so we wrote baby brother. So yeah, because I remember I inscripted, like I wrote baby brother on the bottom. When I make the belly bowls for moms, we can write whatever we want. So just going back to like your question about moms and healing and art. So that all that started in Portland. I came here. I continue to do the belly bowls. I opened up the Ladies Entrance Holistic Art Studio, which is for women, mothers, and pregnant women. I offer gatherings for mothers to connect through the arts. I want it to be a safe place. And, and it's amazing. I've done a lot of work with groups, and it's just amazing the power of the group. When people feel safe and they're in a group, the healing that can happen is incredible. And so that's what I do. And once a month I offer a community come create night. It's for anybody who identifies as a woman, like all ages, because I think multi-generational is important too. So it's like mothers, bring your daughters. Like I invite everybody to come together and craft or do art or talk or, we have food. I guess it's like my recreation of the Project Runway nights. And I also offer work that's a little more specific healing work, energetically with, I mentioned prior, holistic pelvic care, holistic pelvic energy, which is a practice developed by Tammy Lynn Kent, who is from Portland, Oregon. And at first I said, I was doing that work there, but actually I knew of the work and I read Tammy's book when I was in Portland. And then it was after I moved back to Massachusetts that I went and I studied with her, so that I have that training of, like I said, going back to that deeper understanding of creativity on an energetic level and the birth process on the energetic level, and what happens when there's fractures and when there's, interruptions in the birth field, and using ways creatively of healing. So I'm not a physical practitioner. I'm an artist who can connect with people. So I created ways to use the arts to invite a woman to have a healing experience. And that's what I do. That's getting into the energy portraits and doing pelvic energy work and guiding women through meditation for healing.
First, I want to say, I love the name of your studio, the Ladies Entrance. Mm-hmm. It's just, when I first read it, it can mean so many things, right? And I love how it's welcoming and also empowering and like a powerful name to it. So I love that name that you gave for your studio.
Well, there's a story to that. There's a story. There's a birth story to everything, right? So, because creativity, like things like a business is a birth. Like, women don't need, like, this is the thing, like, we're all mothers. Like, we all give birth to creations, whether it's a physical human being or whether it's an entity like the business or, all of that. Like, I use mothering on the broadest terms. And we all mother every single human being, regardless of your gender identity. Because we're talking about nurturing, right? But anyway, so Ladies Entrance, I used to live on top of a bar in South Philadelphia. And the Ladies Entrance was the sign I went and saw every single day while I was going up into my apartment, because it was the rear entrance to the bar, right? Because way back in the day, right, you had to have, the males had to enter the front of the bar and the ladies had to enter the back of the bar, because it was like uncouth, right? Or whatever. Like the ladies couldn't see the men drinking and doing the stuff they do at the bar. They had to enter through the back and go in the back room and get their service or whatever, right? Because there was that big separation, right, of men and women. That one day, this was back when I was still in art school in Philadelphia. No, I had graduated from art school. I was working in the Philadelphia Mural Arts program, but I was living with my husband. We were living together in South Philly before we moved to Portland. And one day I saw the sign. The sign came down, and it's a hand-painted sign. it was, in Philly, if anything's out on the curb, it's free. It's free.
Okay.
Like in Philly, people will swipe at every. So I saw the sign. I'm like, oh my God, the ladies entrance sign. And I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I had no idea. I'm just like, this is a really cool relic of history.
Yeah.
It's a hand painted sign from, I don't know, probably the 1930s, maybe. I'm not sure. So I took it. I'm like, this is a relic. It's a piece of art. It's something that says something about history. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I just thought it was cool. So for a couple of years, it was just, I put a light in it. And it was like, I put my plants on it in my apartment. Like, it was just this cool thing, right? But then again, like I could talk about this forever, but I'll try to make it succinct. As time goes by, I'm like, the ladies' entrance is the main entrance, right? We all enter the world through the female body in some way, shape, or form, right?
Yes.
And I like to put these ideas on it, spin it on its head, because, the honoring of women and everything, like women shouldn't be going through the back door for whatever reason, right? Like we gather together, we're important. Every single human being has a connection, whether it's good or bad, to their mother.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Every human being. So in my desire to make this a place where we gather, where we honor each other, honor our wisdom, our abilities to connect to our intuitive, creative powers, And the other sort of little thing too is that my home studio is in my basement, and it's a sort of like above ground basement. But I just think of, because I'm from Boston, right? I grew up in the 80s, but Cheers, right? The Cheers bar.
Yes.
And Carla, the bartender. And for whatever reason, and don't tell me, I have no idea, but that Cheers song, even before the ladies' entrance, even before I went to art school, like whatever, like I always would hear, I have this thing of like hearing songs over and like they're just kind of like messages. The Cheers song has been with me in my life, and I hear it all the time. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name,
Yeah.
and just that song and what that song represents, or Cheers and what it represents, like that's what I want for this business. Sometimes you want to go like that feeling of community and connection, and where people tell their stories at the bar. I mean, how many people tell their stories at a bar? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And like, I'm not serving, alcoholic drinks. I'm serving art and opportunities for connection. And so I just love this sort of idea of the ladies' entrance being like the ladies' bar in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the real, like it was actually a real sign from a real bar. And just, there's just so many meanings you can add on to the ladies' entrance.
I want to talk a little bit about the holistic pelvic care.
Mm-hmm.
For women, so many times I find that the English language limits us in what we need to speak about healing and experiences, especially relating to motherhood and birth. For anyone who's listening who might be interested in learning more about holistic pelvic care, maybe they have seen a physical therapist and they've had pelvic PT, physical therapy, but there's just something else needed that they can't even put their finger on it. Tell us a little bit more about the holistic pelvic care that you offer if somebody is more interested in learning about what that is and how that might be beneficial for them.
Sure. So most people understand like the term holistic, mind, body, spirit. And we've got a physical body, and there's physical tools we can use, right, to help us connect. Like if you're sore and you get a massage, and you can do a physical massage to help ease the aches and pains, right, in your physical body. And there's also a release that can happen, like a physical release with that tight muscle or, like, right? Like something's actually changing form. So that's a physical level. And then there's also mind, body, spirit. There's, an energetic level, how you're feeling, like they say, there's this connection, right? If you feel things in your gut and your body kind of gives you signs and signals that there's something off, right? And you have this feeling, you just know, and but you don't know how but you just have this feeling, or you have this intuition, or you have this, this thing that you can't shake, right?
Right.
So holistic pelvic care is developed and created by Tammy Lynn Kent, who's a women's health physical therapist. So yes, her training is in the physical women's health and pelvic floor PT. So she works and trains, on the physical body, but also the energy body, our energetics. So we all have like a creative, like the way that she taught me that made like so much sense to me is like our womb space. Yes, it's have, the pelvic bones, right? The pelvic structure, but think of your womb as a bowl space, or think of the womb as a nest, like the physical, think of a pelvic, the pelvic bones, like what it creates is a bowl because it holds your womb, right? In your body, like it holds it. It's a bowl, it's a container. And so even, yes, we have organs, we have, but our body is held up basically in that space. And if you think of the pelvic bowl as a nest, and I do a lot of work with, that analogy and metaphor of a nest, like our nest, like our intentions are, what our feelings are, what our experiences are, like those are held in our nest, in our pelvic bowl, in our creative space. And if we're talking energetics, in terms of energy centers, the second chakra is that pelvic space. And it's the space for creativity and the space of relationships, right? Because we have our sexual organs like there too. So it's creativity and relationship is held energetically in that space. Going back to holistic pelvic care, it's the combining of both physical and energetic tools to create balance where there's imbalance, right? Or to open things up where there's tightness, or to, heal fractures, right? If there's something that's not sort of feeling right, we go from a dissonance to a resonance. That makes sense. Like think of, yin and yang, right? Like everything. Right. So like any one given day, your bowl could feel great one day, and then even in one day, and then you're like, oh, something's off here, And how can we tune in to this wisdom, creative, intuitive center that we all have? Every human being. And again, once again, not just like every human being has it. In males, there's a different name for it, or different traditions that call it like the Dantian, or there's this other, but specifically for women and the female pelvis and the pelvic bowl for those who are born as female at birth. We can combine these tools together. And when you do holistic pelvic care, it doesn't have to be physical work. Like in the physical, if you went to like the pelvic floor therapist, what you would be doing, it's pelvic floor massage, really, myofascial release. This is combining that myofascial release with, if you had a session, a person that does the hands-on holistic pelvic care would bring you through a guided meditation of like, here, focus your thoughts here, right? Mm-hmm. And we're combining sort of the energetic qualities of the womb space, the energetic qualities of the ovaries, and doing the balancing and the clearing. It combines meditation or just imagery, guided imagery with the physical components. So that's how I can't speak for people who do straight pelvic floor therapy to know, exactly what happens in a session with them, but I can speak to what happens in a holistic pelvic care session. And I came into it through solely the energetics of creativity, through the energetic realm, being an artist. I draw the energy, actually, is what I end up doing. I work with the energy by drawing the energy, because physically I don't have the training as a physical therapist or a chiropractor or anything like that. So that's how I approach the work. And I created a way that I connect to energy to work with it, because everybody has different ways, of connecting with energy. My way is actually very kinesthetic. So yeah, so women who are interested in this kind of work, I think I've had it done myself, and I can speak to the power of this healing modality. there's lots of different sort of approaches to it. There's lots of different ways it can be used for women's health, not just for a birthing person. And like for me, I had a session, post birth. You can heal the connection with your child no matter what age they are. Or if you have anything happening in your life where you feel an imbalance, whether it's in a relationship or not even in a relationship, but any intention that you have, you can go to your bowl for the wisdom that it contains. It can never be that medicine, and that wisdom can never be broken. It's always there, but sometimes we can get sort of disconnected from it, but it doesn't mean that it can't be healed, for sure. So yeah, I don't know if that sort of answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. I love how we're talking about different ways to heal, right? To grow, to become connected. And in our culture and our society, there's so much emphasis on the physical realm that it's nice for us to create a space to learn that we can also heal on an energetic realm, on a spiritual realm. And I think that we need that. I think there's a need for that. There's a need to make that connection. There's a need for women birthing people to find women like yourself who are offering these services to help us heal, right? I think there is a lot of trauma. There's a lot of birth trauma. There's a lot of disconnect. And we need to find that connection. We need to find that space so we can heal within ourselves, heal within our families, heal within our relationships to lead a more healthier, however healthy looks to us individually, life. If women are interested, if people are interested in learning more about your services, how can they find you?
Sure. They can find me at the ladies entrance and I'm online. But yeah, my website is ladiesentrance.com and I'm offering belly bowl services and I can do one-on-one holistic pelvic energy sessions, these are like, I do not do any internal physical work. You'd go to a holistic pelvic care provider who's a person that works in the physical realm. But I am training right now to do that. I kind of came into the whole field backwards in a way. I went, you go from physical to energetic. I went from energetic. And we have first Fridays of every month. We have the Come Create nights at the ladies entrance, which is open and it's by donation. And the donation proceeds go to my other baby, my other project, which is called the Survivor Nest Project. And these are opportunities for me to be able to offer arts to survivors of incest and childhood sexual abuse. So yeah, so come find me at ladies entrance or at Survivor Nest.
It has been such a pleasure chatting with you. I'm so grateful that you took time out of your day, out of your busy schedule to come on the show and share your story, to open up, be vulnerable. Together, we can hear from each other, listen to each other's stories, and grow and heal and move forward together. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I just want to say, when I met you and heard about you through a mutual contact, I was amazed by what you're doing. So I think we're doing it together. I just want to say too, so this is April, it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and the national sort of campaign for this month is Together We Act, United We Change. So I just really wanted to thank you because, being able to meet you, seeing what you're doing, I'm really wanting to get, just do more, right? Do what we can for women, for birthing folks, for mothers. So yeah, so together we're doing it, and united we'll help others. We'll heal. We'll heal together.
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you love what we do and want to see our podcast grow, we need your help. By making a donation, you'll be supporting us and bringing you even more great content. I truly believe creating this space for women all across the globe to share their story will allow us to collectively heal, grow and become more empowered in the space that we deserve to be. Motherhood, womanhood, and however that looks and feels for each and every one of us. Every contribution, big or small, will make a huge difference. If you can, head over to support us today. There's a link in the bio to support the podcast. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a part of this journey. Now, let's get back to the episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out our social media. All links are provided in the episode description. We're excited to have you here. Please give us a follow. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, reach out to us via email at info@maternalwealth.com. And remember, stay healthy, embrace your power, and you got this.